everybody, this is Diana from So Very Crafty, and we are here today to make this beginner drawstring backpack. This project is super simple to make. Anybody with beginner sewing skills can make it. It just is 2 pieces of fabric, 2 outer pieces, 2 lining pieces, and some cording, or I just use fabric for my drawstrings today. This is as I said, a beginner sewing project. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and ding that bell for notifications so that you can get more sewing and crafting tutorials in your inbox as they come out. And if you want more sewing and crafting tutorials that you don't find here on the YouTube channel, head over to www.soverycrafty.com and check out what I have over there. You might find something else that you like. There are more intermediate sewing projects over there than there are on the YouTube channel. So you might enjoy those. So now that we know what we're making today, let's get started. Okay, so how do we get started on this project? All we need for this project is some outer fabric, some lining fabric, and some accent fabric. I've used the lining fabric in this case for our drawstrings. For the outer fabric and the lining fabric, you just need 2 pieces of outer fabric and 2 pieces of lining fabric that measure 17 inches by 14.5 inches. So you're going to need one of each, 1 or 2 of each, 2 outer fabrics and 2 lining fabrics. And today I have chosen a sort of home decorator weight fabric for my outer pieces and a Kona cotton for my lining pieces. You can use quilting cotton if you like, but I wanted a little bit sturdier of a drawstring bag today for my project, so I chose a home decorator weight fabric. Another option for this project is, and when I did the original prototype for this particular bag, is I used Ripstop nylon for the lining to make it water resistant so that I could put, bathing suit or some other wet objects inside. I'm not using Ripstop today, but it is a terrific option if you want to make your bag water resistant, is to use some Ripstop nylon for the lining. You can use it for the outer bag as well, but I like using the fabric because it has a lot more choices for me. So how do we get started on this project? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of our outer fabrics and one of our lining fabrics, and we're going to place them right sides together. The next thing that we are going to do, once we place these right sides together, is we are going to stitch along one of our short ends using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And we're going to do that for the other pair of outer and lining fabrics as well. So we're just going to stitch along the short ends using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to run a seam right along here. I'm not going to show it on the sewing machine today because there's no reason. It's just a 3/8 inch seam right across the top. And I'll be right back. So I have stitched these 2 pieces together, the outer piece to the lining piece, and while I was over at the sewing machine, it's close to my iron, so I ironed my seams open for this. The next step for this project is we're going to place our outer pieces and our lining pieces right sides together. And we're going to match these seams. And we're just either going to clip or pin our pieces together so that we can make sure that all of our edges are even. Now I'm using Wonder Clips here, but you could use pins if you like. It doesn't really matter. Now that I have these clipped together, I'm going to draw some lines on my lining piece so that I don't stitch in certain areas. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler, or you can take a tape measure, whatever is easiest for you, and I'm just going to measure down from the seam 1 1/4 inches, and I'm going to draw a mark there. You can draw a line if you want, but just make sure that it's right there where you can see it. And I'm going to do this on the outer pieces and on the lining pieces. Now that you've marked the 1 1/4 inch from the top, you're going to go to the bottom of your lining and the bottom of your outer piece, and you're going to measure up 3/8 of an inch. And again, you're going to make a mark. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Now, once you've measured the 3/8 inch, you're going to measure another 3/4 inch from that mark and make another mark. And we're going to do that on both sides. Now that we've made our marks, we're going to stitch this bag together. The way we're going to stitch this bag together is we're going to stitch a little bit on the bottom until we reach our 3/8 inch mark. we're going to skip over and stitch up from our 3/4 inch mark up until we reach our 1¼ inch mark. And then we will stop, skip over to our other 1¼ inch mark and stitch all the way down, stop at our 3/4 inch mark, and again start up at our bottom 3/8 inch. And we're going to stitch all the way around, stopping at our marks as we've gone along, because that's where our casing is going to go and where our drawstrings are going to end up sewn to our bag. Now, when you're stitching the lining, you want to remember that you're going to need to leave an opening at the bottom or on the side. It doesn't matter where you leave the opening. And the purpose of the opening is so that you can turn this bag right sides out when it's necessary. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I am going to stitch this, starting and stopping at these areas where the marks are, and I'm going to come back and we're going to move on to our next step. Okay, so now I have stitched along the sides, leaving the openings as I've stated, where I indicated. Now I'm going to turn this bag right sides out, and I've left an opening here on the side to do that. I'm just going to reach in, turn the bag right sides out, and I should say that I used a 3/8 inch seam allowance while I was stitching this. So there's so you will need to do that while you're stitching yours, is use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to need to close this opening, and normally I would use ladder stitch, but for this I'm just going to edge stitch this closed, because it'll be in the lining of our project and no one's going to see it, even though I'll know it's there. But in the essence of time, I'm going to just edge stitch this real quick, and then we'll come back to our next step. So I have edge stitched my opening, and I'm going to put my lining inside of my bag. And you can see that there's openings there at the top. Those are supposed to be there. And there's openings on the bottom, which are also supposed to be there. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch this all the way around. And I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch of seam allowance, or you can use 1/4 of an inch, whatever you're more comfortable with, seam allowance to top stitch the lining to the outer bag. Now that I've stitched the top of my bag, I am going to take a heat erasable pen and a ruler and measure down 1 1/4 inch from the top. And I am just going to draw a line all the way around my bag. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch along this line all the way around, making sure that I'm not stitching the bag top together, but using my free arm I can stitch this all the way around. And that's going to create our casing for our drawstring that we're going to be inserting in a few minutes. Now I've created my casing, and you can see that I have an opening here on the side of my bag for my drawstring. Now you have a choice here. You can use cording for your casing to make this project done, or I'm going to use some fabric to match my lining and the little birds on my fabric. So what I've done is I've cut out some 1 5/8 inches wide by the width of my fabric. In other words, how wide my fabric is by 1 5/8. And then I've cut off the selvages, which is the little raggedy ends on the end. And I've cut 3 of those. What I'm going to do with these 3 pieces is I'm going to stitch them together to make one long, really long piece of fabric. And then I'm going to make it just like a bag handle. In other words, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the raw edges to the center, and then I'm going to fold it in half again, so it ends up being a very small, thin fabric piece. And then I'm going to stitch on one side, the side that's open. You can stitch on both sides if you want, and I may stitch on both sides, depends. And then I'm going to come back and we are going to insert, this is going to be my drawstring for this bag, so we're going to insert this drawstring and we're going to finish up this project. Okay, so now I've created my long drawstring. So I'm going to fold this in half and cut it, because we're going to need to have 2 parts of this. And now it's time to feed it through our drawstring and finish up our project. I'm just going to take a safety pin here. If you have a bodkin or something of that nature, you can use that, but the safety pin will work just fine. And we are going to just feed this through. And this casing is wide enough that it should be very simple to feed this strap through. And we're going to feed it all the way through to the other side. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of my bag so that I have drawstrings going in opposite directions. And again, there's plenty of room for both of these drawstrings to fit. And now we have our drawstring. Now we need to turn it into a backpack. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to make sure that our pieces here are even on both sides. Now we have these openings down here on the bottom that we created when we stitched our bag, and we are simply going to place our drawstrings inside of these openings, one on each side. And I'm just going to clip that. And I'm going to do the same for the other. And the opening is plenty big for these drawstrings to go in. Now the next thing I'm going to do, and the last thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to stitch along the bottom here to make sure that these drawstrings can't come out. And I'm going to stitch a couple of times across here just to make sure that my drawstrings can't come out, and we will have finished this project. There we go. We have finished our drawstring backpack. How easy was that? Super simple, takes just a few minutes to make, very, very easy. I hope you enjoyed this project today. I certainly did. It was a fun one, and if you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, ding that bell for notifications, and if you want more sewing and crafting tutorials, head over to www.sewverycrafty.com for loads and loads of more sewing and crafting tutorials that you don't get here on the YouTube channel. I hope that you will give this project a try because it is a very useful and functional project that anyone with beginner sewing skills can make in absolutely no time at all. So I will see you guys next time for the next beginner sewing project here at Sew Very Crafty, and I hope you'll join me. Thank you. and goodbye.